Inclusion is indeed a very important aspect of education, and we will take some time to dig even deeper into the theme All Means All, inclusion in education, starting with an interview with Asha Kanwar, President and CEO of Commonwealth of Learning, and followed by a panel on how to be inclusive with Irina Bokova, former Director General of UNESCO, Daphne Koller, co-founder of Coursera, and Linnéa Lindquist, principal of Hammarkullsskolan in Sweden. Moderator is Adam Smith.
So, Asha Kanwar, welcome. Now, your organisation, the Commonwealth of Learning, promotes education across all Commonwealth countries, which gives you a marvellous perspective. So let's start with the central question. How can we increase access and decrease inequality in provision of education?
Thank you, Adam. Increasing access to education doesn't automatically decrease inequalities. Let's take the example of two sixth-grade girls, one studying in a private school in Bangalore, who interacts daily with her teachers and classmates using her laptop, and she has access to discussions, videos, assignments, etc. In the same city, a sixth-grade girl from a lower income group who studies in a government school has access to a textbook and has been told to watch educational programs on television. So both girls have access, but ironically, the inequalities are very clear. And this is where distance learning can help us bridge these divides, which is what the Commonwealth of Learning promotes.
And what do you precisely mean by distance learning?
Distance learning refers to the separation of teacher and learning. And because they're separated in terms of time and space, some kind of technology must be used for communications. And of course, distance learning requires careful planning for design and delivery. And self-instructional materials are in any format, whether it's print or whether it's online, are absolutely central to distance learning. And these are designed with clear objectives, outcomes, assessments. And they're also designed for asynchronous use, where teachers and students don't necessarily have to communicate simultaneously. And this gives them greater flexibility and convenience. And learner support is provided according to the needs and the context of the learner. So if we were to take those two sixth graders in distance learning, they would be given the same quality content and appropriate tutorial support. And this would lead to equitable outcomes. And social justice has always been the central mission of distance learning.
So we're all part of a distance learning experiment at this precise time, but what evidence is there that distance learning really works?
Well, first in terms of access, distance education has always been used around the world to reach the unreached. In fact, there are 33 open universities in the Commonwealth, which cater to about 5 million learners annually. For example, if it wasn't for these institutions, where would these 5 million people go? Persons with disabilities too have always found distance learning more accessible. Second, its costs. Distance learning costs substantially less than campus provision. We conducted a study in India which shows that the cost of putting a student through an open school, which is, secondary education at a distance, was 1/10 compared to a student in a government secondary school. And it's not just about formal education. Distance learning programs for honey gatherers in the deep forests of Uganda enabled them to learn through their mobile phones in local languages. And the community came from poverty to prosperity in 3 years. Third, quality. Research also shows that there's no significant difference in quality between distance and campus instruction. And of course, fourth, ecology. With all our concerns about climate change, studies in the UK and Botswana show that the carbon footprint of a distance learning student is 1/3 compared to that of the campus counterpart. So in short, we have evidence that distance learning can increase access, reduce costs, improve quality, all with a lower carbon footprint. And I believe this is the moment when distance learning is set to move from margin to mainstream.
Thank you very much indeed. That's a perfect framing for our panel on inclusion that's to follow. Asha Kanwar, thank you.
Thank you, Adam.
I'm delighted to welcome back Daphne Koller and Irina Bokova, who you've already met, and I'm particularly pleased to welcome Linnéa Lindquist, who's a school principal and teacher from Sweden. Welcome, Linnéa. Now, we've heard Asha Kanwar emphasize that access does not necessarily result in equality in education. Let's start with you, Irina. What are the greatest challenges, do you think, to implementing SDG Goal 4, which is to ensure inclusive and equitable quality education?
Let me say, first of all, Adam, that I entirely agree with Asha Kanwar saying that access not necessarily means inclusiveness and quality. When we were adopting goal number 4 of the Sustainable Development Agenda 2030, all 3 elements were equally important. It was access, inclusiveness, and quality. Because we knew at that time, and we still know that 250 million young people, children, and youth are out of school. But because of the poor quality education, because of the lack of inclusiveness, more than 600 million nowadays, according to the UNESCO Institute of Statistics, do not have the basic learning skills of reading, of math, and some of the others. And half of them live in the G20 countries. So my point is that in order to make inclusiveness work, you have to create the enabling environment. You have to have the right community approach. You have to train teachers. You have to, nowadays, in a post-COVID or in a COVID crisis that we see, you have to give them access to the digital platforms. And here comes, I believe now, one of the biggest obstacles to those who do not have this access. And there, nowadays in the world, more than 3.5 billion people that do not have this access, and among them, of course, millions of children and young people. So the digital access, and we know that education becomes more and more digital, it creates enormous opportunities, no doubt about it. But unless we solve the problem with these bottlenecks of the digital access of children, I don't believe that we can speak about inclusiveness and achieving the implementation of goal number 4. And at the end of the day, I believe this is the heart of Sustainable Development Agenda. And just a small point, and I think it's also important to know that schooling and education in many countries, it is also providing children with the breakfast, with food. Going to school, it's also a social interaction. And education is about values. Education is about transmitting these values. And all this has to be taken into account when we speak about the achievement and of the goal number 4 into a new digital era.
Thank you. Yeah, there's so much to consider, but if we take the digital divide, Daphne, would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, so I think Irina already spoke well about the importance of getting access to people to things like the kind of equipment that can allow them to engage meaningfully with the course content and as well as the internet connectivity that is required for watching videos and interacting with fellow students online. So I don't think I need to repeat a lot of those themes. I'd like to come back to one of the other themes that Kanwar spoke of, which is that of quality and the way in which quality plays into that divide, into the equality situation, because part of the problem is that the quality of the materials is so much more important in a distance learning setting than it is in a face-to-face instruction. Because frankly, if you have a bad teacher and you're sitting there in the classroom, you're kind of forced to learn anyway. And I'm not saying it's ideal, but the fact of the matter is you're there and there's an opportunity to learn. In a distance learning setting, people just tune out. And there's been study after study that shows that without high quality instructional materials, and even more importantly, without a strong engagement between a live human and the student, be it a teacher or a coach, to keep students students with less academic preparation or less advantaged backgrounds engaged with the course content, they just drop out. And so I think quality and engagement with teachers is much more important in a distance and is the only way to really get us to a point of equality.
And as digital education encompasses far more people, what is the bottleneck in sort of increasing engagement? What do you have to focus on to make that happen?
I think it's the human touch. Asynchronous course content is wonderful and allows us to take the best of breed in terms of videos highlighting incredible scientific experiments or historical sites or whatever, and really present some of the best teaching masters to students. But also you need that interactive contact, because learning is fundamentally a social experience. And so how do we create that engagement between student and teacher, student and student, to create that active learning loop, and also the sense of accountability that students have when someone is actually looking at them, waiting for them to be successful?
Irina, please.
Yes, I totally agree with Daphne, and I would just like to add that the importance of supporting teachers, I believe, is critical. I have always said that nothing can substitute a good teacher in education, whatever technology. And I think it's even more important today with the digital platforms, because it does not go automatic. We just go digital and everything's fine. Teachers have to be supported more. They have to, the pressure on them and the demand on them to be more engaging, to be more innovative, to be in a way better in transmitting this social value of learning, of teaching, is even higher. And of course, it's about the content. It's about how you match the content, the teaching in an environment which is entirely different. So I think we have to rethink everything that we have spoken about teachers and learning. And they, I believe, stay still the key to a good learning and to the inclusiveness.
Thank you. Well, let's bring a teacher into the conversation. Linnéa, you work with some of the most vulnerable students in Sweden. 99% of your students in your current school do not have Swedish, I gather, as their first language. So what for you is the key to engagement for those students?
Yes, as you said, 99.1% is Swedish as the second language. So it's a huge challenge for us to both teach them Swedish. They go to a school where the Swedish is the minority language, which is a huge problem. They only have like everyday language, and you don't manage school with everyday language. You have to have advanced language. So what we do, we have a lot of one-to-one training in Swedish with the children. So we try to do it individually a lot, because it's really hard to teach them both the subjects and the language at the same time. But the teachers are really teaching the children. They stay after the lessons and try to help them more. So it's really about what the teacher do.
So it's really a focus on the teacher. It's really a focus on the support that is required for the teachers, as Irina was just emphasizing.
Yes, exactly.
Mm-hmm. And what
and
apart from
I
language,
also say one of the things that is so important to see, that only 24% of the parents to my students have a post-secondary education. So we have a lot of parents that they don't even know how to read and write by themselves. And the first book our students, not everyone, but the majority, is the one that we give them in preschool class. The second book they own is the one they get from us when they finish in third grade. So we have to do everything in the school. We have to learn how to read, how to to write, and we have to give them an arena to read and write, and we have to do almost everything for them.
It must be incredibly challenging to deal with that in what becomes a digital environment where they're then at home trying to accomplish these things.
Yes, we have iPads and we have some devices, but we also want them to experience books. So we have a lot of printed teaching materials.
Daphne,
and our
please.
library is like the center of the school. The library is so important.
Daphne.
So I think it's really important to understand the role of the teacher as a potential surrogate for the parent when the parent doesn't have necessarily the background to help their children, and also to instill the same set of expectations in terms of achievement that parents who've gone through the educational route might have had more exposure to. And I think that really does put a much greater burden and therefore need to support teachers as they help encourage students, whether it's kids or even older students, as a way of making sure that they stay on the right path and become successful. And again, that delta between people who have that intrinsic sense of need to achieve instilled in them versus the ones that might not have as much of that is only enhanced in the digital world, where there's more opportunities to go off track. And so I think that comes back to the need to really support teachers in helping them keep students on track and engaged.
Thank you very much indeed. I think that's a fantastic point to end on. Unfortunately, we have so little time for these panels, but that's been a lovely conversation and I've really enjoyed listening to you. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.